I'm a fan of YouTuber Graham Stephan, and a while back I was watching a video where he talked about selling his home in Santa Monica and relocating to Las Vegas. Now in the video he talked about the reasons he sold his house as opposed to keeping it and renting it. Among the reasons he decided to sell was because of the strict rent control rules in Santa Monica. I was curious about Graham's reasons to sell in Santa Monica and learn more about the rent control restrictions that were the straw that broke the camel's back for him. This is Sunday Money. So before we jump into Santa Monica rent control, I want to zoom back and take a look at the big picture. What do you give up by selling your home in California? So first off, California has something called Proposition 13, and this applies to all real property in California. It limits your base property tax, capping the annual tax increases at 2% in California. Now, when you purchase a home in Santa Monica, the effective property tax rate is about 1.2% of the total cost. Now, Clark County, where Graham bought his new home in Las Vegas, has an effective rate of around 0.79%. Nevada has a similar annual property increase cap, but the cap is set at 3% instead of 2%. Now, Graham's Santa Monica annual property taxes were likely at least $10,000 more per year compared to his new home in Vegas, but most of that is due to the fact that his home in Santa Monica was about $600,000 more expensive than his Vegas home. If he had paid $1.5 million for his home in Santa Monica, his annual property tax would have been closer to his Vegas annual taxes. The property tax rate in California is higher, but in Santa Monica, he doesn't have the master plan and gated community layer of fees like he has in Vegas. And I suspect property taxes would still have been more in Santa Monica had he paid exactly what his Vegas home cost, but with the higher annual cap in Vegas, over time that difference would narrow. Santa Monica has a homeless problem that the city has struggled to control for years, so I totally get moving to a gated community in Vegas gets you away from all that. But Vegas has about 9,000 homeless. Santa Monica has about 812. But to give that fair context, the city of Los Angeles has about 43,695 homeless. West Los Angeles, which covers Westwood, Brentwood, Pacific Palisades, Venice, Malibu, Beverly Hills, and Santa Monica, where Graham's home was, had a total of 5,265 from a 2024 count. I know I'm cherry-picking some numbers, and I'm not trying to somehow say it's worse than Vegas, but hear me out. When you drill down to areas like Santa Monica, or where Graham currently lives in Vegas, the biggest thing is visibility. The weather in Vegas can be extremely hot. You have to find some shelter to survive. In fact, many homeless in Vegas live in underground tunnels. In Los Angeles, the climate is so mild that you can live outdoors pretty much year-round. But the difference is that in Vegas, especially in affluent areas like Summerlin, where Graham lives, you simply don't see it as much as in affluent areas like Santa Monica, where you most definitely see it. Okay, let's talk about Santa Monica rent control. Here's what Graham had to say.
According to the city of Santa Monica, the most I could increase rent every year is $60. Yes, you heard that correctly. That is equivalent to a 0.5% rent increase per year. Meanwhile, my property taxes go up by 3% a year. My insurance goes up 10% a year. My repair and material cost goes up 20% a year. My labor cost goes up 50% a year.
But here's the thing. He says his property taxes go up by 3% per year, but Prop 13 actually caps your property tax by 2% per year. He says his insurance goes up 10% per year, but homeowners insurance rates in California have risen 53.7% since 2020, but California homeowners pay 41% below the national average for homeowners insurance, according to LendingTree's State of Home Insurance 2026 report. As far as holding real estate versus keeping it and renting for income, billionaire investor Ray Dalio recently warned against buying and holding real estate in the current economy for three main reasons. Let's watch.
Real estate is more interest rate sensitive than it is even inflation sensitive. So if you were to say, if this environment happens, does it go? It goes down in real terms. It's also an asset that is a fixed asset that is the easiest asset to tax. In other words, you in any place, you're in a particular state, putting in real estate taxes means that they could always get the money. And so it's not an effective diversifier that way. And also being able to move money from one place to another, the real estate is nailed down.
So that's a good point. So score one for selling. Now, Graham mentioned his home in Santa Monica was about 100 years old and maintenance is a valid point. We have a 98-year-old Spanish-style home in Burbank, California, and we are constantly replacing and upgrading. So for example, the original cast iron waste lines installed when our home was built in 1928 last 75 to 100 years, and we've had to do a full sewer line replacement when the line broke. and that is a big expense. On the other hand, framing for older homes, the 2x4s were spaced closer together, 12 inches apart versus 16 like they are today. Now, in those days, they used more mature and stronger old-growth lumber, and the walls were lath and plaster. So lath and plaster was a traditional method used to build interior walls and ceilings, and it consists of narrow wooden strips of lath nailed horizontally across the wall studs or ceiling joists, which are then coated in layers of wet plaster to create a smooth, solid wall. Modern construction uses drywall for the interior walls. Between the lath and plaster and the structure's closer 2x4 spacing, those old homes like ours are built like tanks. So now let's talk about Santa Monica rent control. Graham talked about the severe restrictions on trying to keep and rent his home in Santa Monica. Let's watch.
Well, one of the biggest reasons I sold is that because I do not live here, and this is not a primary residence, I am subject to Santa Monica rent control, which would require me to completely relinquish all of my property rights indefinitely as soon as a tenant moves in. And if you want to hear just how absurd some of these rules are, get a load of this. First, even though this home would likely rent for a market value of more than $12,000 a month, according to the city of Santa Monica, the most I could increase rent every year is $60. Second, let's say I do rent it out because I genuinely don't like raising rents. Well, in that case, as soon as the tenant moves in, they gain the permanent right to use the property for as long as they want to. This means I can't just say, hey, something came up, I need to sell the house, here's 6 months notice. That's illegal under the just cause eviction ordinance. Instead, in that case, I as the homeowner are completely powerless, and the tenant's allowed to stay for as long as they want to, which leads me to third. Let's just say I want to move back into my property as a primary residence. Well, that's allowed, but only if I pay the tenant a relocation fee of $38,250 just to move back into my own home. And if I decide I don't want to live there for the next 2 years, I have to offer it back to the original tenants at their original price. And if I don't, I could get sued. Fourth, even if I do pay the tenant $38,250 and I agree to move back in as a primary residence for the following 2 years, I also cannot ask the tenant to move out during the school year. But here's the kicker. We have fifth, despite me furnishing my home with expensive artwork and hand-built furniture, it is illegal in Santa Monica to rent out a furnished home. So I would have to remove everything to comply with rules that give the tenants more rights to the home than the actual homeowner. All of this means that if I were to rent out my house, I'm at the complete mercy of the tenant and they are allowed to stay here indefinitely without me having really any say in it. And for me, it's just not worth the stress.
But here's the thing. Single-family homes are exempt from Santa Monica's strict rent control caps. Now, there was a suggestion in Graham's comments that because his home has a granny flat, what we call an ADU, some commenters speculated that this is the legal trap that put Graham's home in the strict rent control arena. Now, I wasn't clear about that either, so I reached out to the City of Santa Monica's Rent Control Board to get their take on Graham's claim, and here's what they said. So it looks like they had an owner-occupied exemption since it's a 2-unit property, and that exemption would in fact lapse if the owner was no longer living there. Okay, so I thought about this for a moment, and I had more questions, so I called the city right back. So you mentioned that you had an owner-occupied exemption, and that would lapse if he moved out and tried to rent it, because it has more than one unit. It's got a granny flat. Could he have applied for a new exemption and kind of made the case that it's going to be a single unit lease? The granny flat doesn't have a separate meter. No one's ever rented it before. Well, it comes down to the original registration with rent control. So whatever the standard was in '79, it looks like it was most likely being used for rental purposes. Maybe both units were being rented. If there were 2 units being rented at the time, that's likely the way it is in our system, and that's the way it's registered. Okay, I understand Graham's frustration here. The issue is that as far as the city of Santa Monica is concerned, his house was never a single-family dwelling. It was always a multi-unit property, and he was living there under the owner-occupied exemption that would have lapsed if he left. But you know what? That's just based on lost information. I mean, it's just simply tagged in the city's system that way. Who knows how long that tag has been there? It could have just been a mistake. I mean, we're talking about records going back to 1979. So if Graham was able to dig up records to prove that the house was never rented in the first place, then he could have applied and got the single-family home exemption. It's a headache for sure, but that explains it. But I gotta say, as an owner of an almost 100-year-old home where things can break, and in his case, he would have become an out-of-town landlord, I probably would have sold too. When I think about areas to live in, I go, well, what am I really looking for? And I thought about this a lot, and it kind of boiled down to three things. I use the acronym CVC, and that stands for culture, vibe, and climate. I love LA's multicultural scene. It's got lots of global diversity. It's a car culture. There's a wellness and lifestyle culture, which is sometimes perceived superficially, we all collectively make fun of. The vibe is the SoCal vibe. It's LA beaches, Beverly Hills, Hollywood. It's laid back and highly creative. Nobody's up early, and most things aren't open late. And for the climate, you can't beat the climate. It has year-round moderate temperatures that are generally great. But to live here, you have to take the good with the bad. LA is a fun place to live. The weather is great, and a lot of people want to come here, which drives up prices. It has a homeless problem, and California has state income tax, while Nevada has none. There are so many cool local restaurants, street food from around the world, and an endless variety of unique neighborhoods, each with their own rhythm. It has a surprising number of free things to do. There's amazing hikes and beaches and museums and parks. You can walk along unique areas like Frogtown, where nature is retaking the LA River, or catch a show at the Hollywood Bowl. You can have a meal at a Michelin restaurant like Somni in West Hollywood, watch the sunset at the Getty, which is also free, or grab a life-changing shrimp taco for $3 at food truck Morisco Salisco in Boyle Heights. Parking can be impossible, traffic can be worse, but for me, there is no other place like it in the world. And no shade on Las Vegas. Like I said, I have family there. Vegas definitely wins on value. But for me, my culture, vibe, and climate formula, it's just not the same. So thanks for watching. I'll have links below to the data points referenced in this video, as well as links to some of the videos included in this episode and Graham's episode, which this show is based on. So best of luck, Graham, and we'll see you all next time.